All right, so real quick before we go over it, yesterday we started talking about ellipses and the standard form for ellipses. So remember that there's two different kinds. There's horizontal and there's vertical. Okay, so a vertical ellipse has the major axis along what? X or Y axis? The Y, right? Which one's the vertical axis? The Y, right? So a vertical ellipse would be taller than it is wide. Okay, the major axis is your vertical one, which is the y-axis, and the minor is your horizontal, which is the x-axis. And so the A is always, remember, the larger of the numbers, and if it's vertical, the A goes where? Under the y. So this would be a squared, this would be b squared. If it's a horizontal ellipse, then it's wider than it is tall. Okay, the major is now the x, and the minor axis is the y. And this time, the a squared goes under what? Good, under the x. And then the other thing we went over is the relationship between A, B, and C in order to find the foci, right? So the foci are along the major axis. So here I'd have somewhere along this axis would be my foci, and somewhere along these would be my foci, which is the value of C if the center is at 0, 0. And then what's the relationship between A, B, and C? Good. C squared equals A squared minus B squared. And then the other thing we talked about is the vertices. So the actual vertex or vertices are along your major axis, and the co-vertex or co-vertices are along your minor axis. So these would be your regular vertices, these would be your co-vertices. On horizontal, these would be your major vertices, and these would be your co-vertices. It's kind of a wrap-up of everything we talked about yesterday. Okay, so now let's apply it to the warm-up. So this says write an equation in standard form for each ellipse with center at 0, 0. So if number one, if my vertex is at 0, 5, I already know that which is the major axis. The vertical one, which tells me that the a squared is going where? Good. So I know it's going to be this. Okay, this is your A. This co-vertex, that's going to be your B. So these go here and here. So it looks something like that. Okay, x squared over b squared or over 1 squared is x squared over 1. And y squared over 5 squared would equal y squared, this is plus, over 25 equals 1. So x squared over 1, or just x squared because it's the same thing, y squared over 25 equals 1. Questions on that one? Raise your hand if you got it right. Okay. So number 2 says vertex at 5, 0 and focus at negative 2, 0. So what's happening now is the switch, right? 5, 0 means 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Means the other vertex would be over here. So my major axis is now the x-axis. So A would be under x. This is my A. This is actually, the focus would be what value? The C. Good. So this is C. So I know it's going to do something like that. I just don't know how tall it's going to go. So if C squared equals A squared minus B squared, then negative 2 squared equals A squared, 5 squared minus B squared, 4 equals 25, minus B squared, negative 21 equals negative B squared. B would equal the square root of 21. So if I wanted to approximate that, that's a little less than 5. I could draw it on the axis if it asked me to graph it. But really all I need it for is to plug it back into the b squared, which gets rid of the square root. So I end up with x squared over a squared, which is 5 squared, plus y squared over square root 21 squared equals 1, which is x squared over 25 plus y squared over 21 equals 1. Questions on any of that? So there's a little bit to go in 12.3, but then that's it. That wraps up what's covered on your test. Ian?
Can you explain what's the purpose of the focus?
You're gonna, so you need 3 letters. I mean, really you need 2. You need A and B. If they give you A and B, you don't even need C, right? But if they give you A and C, which is the foci, you have to use that to get B. And if they gave you B and C, you'd have to use those to get the A. So if they give you the vertex and the co-vertex, you don't need the foci.
Okay.
But if they give you a vertex in the foci or a co-vertex in the foci, you have to use that value of C to get your A.
And then which one of the 2 do you plug into that equation?
Whichever 2 you have.
No, but I'm saying like you see how you have 2 different, like you have 2 red dots? Like which point do you plug into there?
Into your standard equation? Or into the c squared equals a squared minus b squared?
Like if you go back up, how it tells you the what is it, the focus is at -2, 0, do you use that one?
I only use it to get the b.
Okay,
You don't have to graph it.
But you don't use the opposite one, which is the 2, 0.
Oh, well, it wouldn't matter, you're squaring it.
Oh.
Yeah, it wouldn't matter, good question. Technically the c is actually a positive always, but it doesn't matter, you're squaring it. Same thing with a and b,
So
you're always
you
squaring
plug
it.
into the equation.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm confused on like how you pick which numbers to put into the C equals.
So if you're given the vertex, right, then your value is A. Because vertex is the major axis, it's going to be the widest one, that's your A. If you're given the co-vertex, you're given the B. If you're given the foci, you're given the C.
So then you just always use the first number?
No, you'll use, for 0, 0, you'll use whatever one's not 0. Because 1 will always be 0 if it's 0, 0. Which now we're going to shift it a little bit. Okay? So I think it's easy if it's 0, 0. It's just whatever one's not 0. It gets a little bit more complicated when you move it. Any other questions? Okay. So okay, so what happens if we shift the center so that it's not at 0, 0 anymore? Okay, this changes the top part of your equation. The rest of it is still exactly the same, but it also changes how we find those parts. So it's similar to your circle. If you remember your circle, the equation was x minus h squared plus y minus k squared. Okay, same thing here. So the hk is your center. In your standard equation, you'll do x minus h over a squared plus y minus k squared over b squared equals 1. The difference is that now you're shifting your vertices and your foci and your co-vertices. So again, a little bit easier to see it than actually look at those formulas, but hopefully they help you a little bit. So this just says identify the center, the A and the B, and then graph the ellipse. So start with the center. Go ahead. Does everybody understand that? We took what was after the x, changed the sign just like we would do with the circle, right? Took what was after the y, changed the sign. Yes, you with me so far? How do I know which one's A and which one's B? The bigger one's a. So this is a squared, right? 49 equals a squared, which means a is what? 7. And 16 equals b squared. So b is 4. So let's start with this information. So the first thing you want to do is plot your center. Negative 4, 1, 2, 3. Now, which one's my major axis and which one's my minor axis? The A is the major and the A is under X or Y? A is under X. Everybody sees that? Which means that this is going to be wider than it is tall, which means that from this point that I just plotted at my center, I'm going right 7 and left 7. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So it's not where the vertex is now at positive 7 and negative 7 because my center shifted. And then the y-axis, which is my minor axis, is up and down 4. So I go up 1, 2, 3, 4, and I go down 1, 2, 3, 4. So without doing any work, you should be able to look at your equation and get the center from it and identify if this is going to be a horizontal or a vertical, right? Bigger number under the x, it's horizontal. Bigger number under the y, it's vertical. Figure out your A and your B, and then count over your A on whichever axis is your major axis. Count over your B, whatever axis is your minor axis.
What do you use to plot those points?
So once I find, you're good on the center?
Yeah.
Once I get the center, A is on my major axis. So I know that the bigger number's under the X, which means the horizontal is going to be wider. Does that make sense? So because A is 7, I go from my center and I count to the right 7 and to the left 7. And then B is 4. So I go up 4 and I go down 4. If those two letters were switched, if the X had the bigger, if the Y had the bigger number, then I would have gone up 7, down 7, right 4, left 4.
So you're just like doing the reverse of the equation, like, because like they give you 49 and you just like bring it down to 7.
You just square root it. Yeah, you square root each of those numbers, and those are going to be your A's and B. Bigger one is A, smaller one's the B. And then depending on where that A is located, will tell you which axis are you going to count the A and which one are you going to count the B. Okay, so it's not that complicated, it's just that it's not as easy to see the 0 and that you won't see it that way. These will be shifted. Same exact question, but what's the difference here? So they're going to be interchanged. You've got to be able to identify what's going on. What do I know about the center here? It's 0, 0. So realize on a test they're going to be looped together. They can be approached the same way, but don't make it harder than it's got to be. Good. 64 is bigger, and that's under the X, so this is horizontal. A squared is 64, so A is 8. B squared is 25, so B is 5. And then you graph. So horizontal tells me I'm counting right and left the bigger of the two, which is the A. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And then the B is 5. It's equal 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. All right, so what's the center? 2, positive 4. Is this vertical or horizontal? Horizontal. The bigger one's underneath the X. Okay. A squared is 25, so A is 5. B squared is 9, so B is 3. So start with your center. Over 2, up 4. And then we just said it's horizontal, which means we're counting to the A, right and left. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And the B up and down. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. Easy stuff, right? Yes? Questions? All right, so test-wise, which we'll start to review a little bit. I mean, we'll start on Monday to review, but if you want to get a head start and start looking back at your material, your test is covering 6.3, 6.5, 6.6. So this was piecewise functions, inverses, and then all the things you can do with your functions. Add f plus g, f minus g, f times g, the composite function f of g, g of x, and the horizontal line test. All of that was this stuff, which was on your quiz, which I still have some to get back. And then 12.1, 12.2, and 12.3. So really 12.1 is going to just help you when you get to 12.2 and 3. You're not going to be like, there's no hyperbolas thrown in, okay? It's really ellipses and circles. If I give you the information, can you graph it? If you're given the information, can you write the equation? And vice versa. If you were given the graph, could you give the equation? That kind of thing.
Do you have to divide functions?
Dividing functions, no, actually there's none. No, there's the same thing that was on the quiz. Adding, subtracting, multiplying, composite.
Are we using our calculators for this one?
No, no. Okay, all right.